And since you're all here and engaged in this sort of inquiry and listening to this sort of lecture, I assume that you're all on the process of waking up. Or else you're teasing yourselves with some kind of flirtation with waking up.
I am your father. I'm Batman.
I'm Spartacus!
Bond. James Bond.
Hello. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Goonies never say die! You're killing me, Smalls!
I see dead people.
That the power of Christ compels you!
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
What's going on, friends? Logan Myerz here for episode 39 of the Cinephellas podcast. Doing this podcast solo tonight, no Henry Hill, so you guys get to enjoy my sultry and sensual voice. Ooh! Aww. If you guys have been following our social media and YouTube channel, you can see that we've been putting out a lot of podcasts lately. Every week, Henry and I are trying to discuss, movies and TV news and reviews, new trailers coming out, movies we've seen in the theater, TV shows we're checking out. And hopefully you guys have been enjoying those podcasts, having a great time doing that. Trying to get Henry more involved. He's a busy man, has a child, has a house, like myself, so he's always pretty busy, so it's great. Sharing some laughs and talking about everything that we love in the entertainment industry. So hopefully you guys have been following along and enjoying it as much as we have. And eventually we want to get this up, on iTunes, get on other podcast streaming platforms. Right now it's only YouTube. It's in the works. It's a project. We want to get everything moved over. So hang in there. It'll happen eventually. So the last podcast we were kind of talking about, a bunch of movies, TV shows. The Boys, that just came out on Amazon Prime. It's the biggest show on Amazon Prime ever, the most views. Absolutely loved it. I reviewed it on our YouTube channel. Henry had a great time with it. And also in that podcast, we're talking about Scary Stories. Friends' 25th anniversary, they're going to be showing a bunch of the episodes in theaters in September and October. The brand new season of Netflix's Mindhunter, which we've been patiently waiting for a few years now, just returned to the streaming platform Netflix. So I'm going to be diving into that this weekend and binging that and hopefully reviewing that for your viewing pleasure next week. Also in the past podcast, we're talking about upcoming shows coming out this fall and movies coming out this fall. So if you guys haven't checked that out, go ahead and listen to it on our YouTube channel. We'll also have it on our website and social media outlets. But tonight I had the pleasure of talking with the director of the brand new film Driven, starring Jason Sudeikis, and my man, Lee Pace. And he was phenomenal. I love that actor. And the brand new film called Driven. So the premise of the setup of the film Driven, it's set in the early 1980s California. Oh yeah, those are the good old days. It takes place between two characters, John DeLorean, played by Lee Pace, and his friend Jim Hoffman, played by Jason Sudeikis, which is a phenomenal, great comedic actor from SNL, if you guys aren't familiar. And it's about their friendship. John DeLorean had his iconic DeLorean Motor Company back then. He was involved with the designing the GTO and then obviously the DeLorean car, which we know famous from Back to the Future films.
Are you telling me you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
But the car basically flopped and the company went under. But this film is kind of through the eyes of this friendship between Jim Hoffman and John DeLorean. And John DeLorean turned to the cocaine business because of his failing company, all the financial trouble they had with the DeLorean Motor Company. And as like a FBI informant, he was like a scumbag, and he kind of sold out his friend John DeLorean. Hoffman gives up DeLorean, and it turns into this court case. It actually really happened in history. I was not aware of this until seeing the film. But it was a really great story, really great cast of people. We have Corey Stoll in this film, and also Judy Greer that was in the new Halloween. And they play some good characters, Ellen Hoffman, and then Corey Stoll is like the special agent, FBI, kind of working with Jim Hoffman's character and trying to lure DeLorean in and then, ratting him out. And it's a really interesting story having to do with a car designer, engineer, and this cocaine trafficking ring set up by the FBI. So it was very interesting premise, and, this is all historical events. This actually happened. I looked into this after watching the film. As we know from DeLorean, he was loaded. He was an awesome guy. He created one of the most iconic cars in films of all time. and seeing the backstory of what he went through in the early 1980s. So tonight I had the pleasure of interviewing the director, Nick Hamm, British director, fantastic dude. I really had a great conversation with Nick Hamm, about making this film, how he got involved with this project, being the director and being at the helm, and also filming this in Puerto Rico before and after Hurricane Maria. So that's pretty insane. And how that affected, them filming this movie with, production team, everybody on set, them not having electricity, water, all the basic needs you need for being a human and also filming a movie. So they had a lot of struggles they had to overcome. And, Nick talks about that in his interview. And I was surprised how much I love this film, Driven. And hopefully you guys enjoy this conversation with Nick Hamm. Let's get to it, shall we? Hey, Nick, how you doing?
Hello. I'm doing great, mate. Thank you very much for asking. How are you?
Oh, not doing too bad. It's an honor to talk to you today. We're huge fans of your work.
Great.
So first of all, I wanted to ask you, how'd you get involved with this project, Driven?
Well, actually, my writing partner and I started it from the beginning. We developed it together. When we were working on the journey, we started to noodle around and think about what was, this story, because we're both from Belfast. So we remembered this kind of crazy idea that this guy had built this factory in the middle of war-torn country, and it had all gone pear-shaped, and he was kind of rather a folk hero in some respects in Northern Ireland. And also, his reputation was very muddied. So we were kind of always fascinated by it. So we started working on the script, and then we discovered so much more narratively that you could do with it. And, when we discovered the character of Hoffman and the link between the two of them and the coke, we knew about the coke deal and we knew about the FBI, but we didn't know the details. We thought, well, this is a great story. Let's go.
Yeah, it was a fantastic story. I didn't know too much about it until watching the movie. It's a really interesting take on these characters. What was it like making this movie in Puerto Rico before and after the Hurricane Maria?
Wow. Well, that's a big question. I mean, I don't know whether they showed you the doc, did they?
Yeah, I watched it. It was really
right.
Awesome.
So you got pretty much some idea. I mean, we'd been shooting for, I think, 5 or 6 days. We had, really good stuff in the can. It was looking great. And then, we were all evacuated to mainland America, New York. And so we watched this thing come in and destroy the island, and there's a bunch of stuff that happens when a hurricane comes through afterwards. There's no power. There's no cash.
Yeah.
There's no power. There's no cash because there's no credit cards, right? So there's no gasoline. There's no power. There's no gas. There's no cash, and there's no water.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got this sort of crazy situation, and I think we were all terrified about going back, and we were all worried, and we didn't know whether we should go back or whether we shouldn't go back, or how do we play it, or what do we do? And it was the local people that persuaded us and said, look, you've got to come back. We want you to finish this movie. We want, and we realized if we hadn't gone back, then the Puerto Rican industry would have been set back months and months. No one would have gone back for years. So I think the thing is, we had a moral duty to go back because we had like 300-400 people on a payroll. B, we knew that we were making something good. And C, we wanted to see if we could, we obviously didn't want to hinder the rescue now, but we were never in a position where we were going to do that. We were putting money and jobs back into the country when they needed it. So that was our main idea was to do that. And it was pretty horrendous. You had to reimagine certain scenes. The ping pong scene, for example, was a golf course, right? Because he was fanatical about winning DeLorean. He had to win at everything he did. He had to win at every sport he played. Right, so even when he played volleyball or he played netball, I think on the beach volleyball, right? He got the American coach to teach him during the winter, so that when he was going playing again the following summer, he would be best. Right, so so the chess scene, for example, was a golf scene. The ping pong scene was was outside in another sporting. So scenes had to change because locations just weren't there.
Right. And I just remember watching that documentary recently. It just heartbreaking to see so many people affected and their homes completely destroyed. How did
Completely.
that experience?
I mean, for real.
Yeah, I have an aunt that's from Puerto Rico. She lives in the U.S. now, but yeah, just talking to her about that. Her family still lives there. It's heartbreaking to see that. And I can't imagine, trying to film a movie there when all that's going on.
You're right. I mean, it's hard enough it's hard enough the best time to make a film, right? I mean, it's difficult enough to make a decent movie, even when you've got all the circumstances that are around you that are perfect. Even when you've got everything that you need. But I tell you what happens. I mean, what happens is there's a great leveling out amongst all the talent, amongst the crew and everything, because nobody has anything. So everybody has something. All right? So there's no private cars. There's no, you don't get your special lunch delivered. You don't get your sushi. You don't get this. You don't have your cappuccino. You're in a minibus. You're driven to set. You're dropped off. You're picked up again at the end of the day. That's it. So there's a kind of camaraderie that happens amongst the crew, which is kind of amazing. And also amongst the actors. Everybody bonds together. And I think, the weird celebration of all of this is that in some way, when the movie, was at Venice and, got celebrated like that, I think it was a real indication of, those people going back to work and doing a good job. That was the kind of incredible thing about that.
Yeah, it seemed like it was beautiful. So with that being said, there's a lot of struggles. How did you overcome the struggles, filming this movie with no electricity, cell service, all that good stuff?
Well, I mean, I think you're pretty self-contained on a movie crew. As long as you have gasoline, you have your own generators, you have your own power. We bought our own gasoline, had our own water supply. We had, you're pretty in the end. You're kind of self-contained mobile unit, and so you basically, as soon as you could, you saw in the documentary, we cleaned up a load of spaces, we cleaned up the sets that we needed to clean up. We adapted very quickly to what wasn't around anymore. A couple of scenes we shot in the foyer of the hotel we were staying in because we couldn't get out that day, right? So we shot a bar scene there. So, in a way, it's kind of, I suppose it's a weird thing to say, but, creation comes sometimes from the weirdest circumstances. And the most adverse circumstances can sometimes produce the most creative work. And as long as everybody feels they're in it together and that kind of, the struggle is there, then it's all good. Yeah.
And I'm glad everybody banded together and got this movie, finished because it was absolutely phenomenal.
They all believed in it, because I think if we hadn't, we turned over, I think if we hadn't done that 5-6-7 day turnover before that thing came in, the movie would have gone down. The money would not have been there to properly mount the movie. It would have gone. The fact that we shot the 6-7 days, the financing was in place, everybody getting paid, everybody was there, and that was in the end the thing that made that everybody went back to, because we knew we had something good, and everybody was very proud of it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing about art. Everybody bands together and creates something, and it really shows.
Well, you're right, and it's also an example of Hollywood giving back in a funny way. Look, it's a pretty narcissistic business. It's pretty, based on self-interest. It doesn't exactly have great PR, outside of itself, right? Do you know what I mean? But to the outside world, our industry, as it were, sometimes gets pretty bad press, right? Because all they see is the kind of the red carpets and the kind of, what would you say, some of the kind of narcissistic behavior of some of the people involved in the business, right? So actually, when we do give back and we actually do something, here's an example of the movie business actually putting an infrastructure back into a country,
Yeah, that's just very inspiring. Being the director of this film, how did the overall experience change you as a human being and also a filmmaker?
I think it made me simpler, to be honest with you. I think that because you got constraints, because you were with so many kind of difficulties, you had to dig in and kind of pull through. I think creatively you become a simpler individual, if that makes sense. Your solutions become simpler. You don't reach for the tricks. You don't you're not killing yourself. It's too hard to kill yourself, right? It's too hard to try and, I suppose, experiment in a different way. You just have to really know your stuff. and you really have to be focused about what you're going to go for and what you're going to get, you know. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do that, you know, you can get into trouble.
Right.
So I think in a way, what it teaches you as a director, it teaches you to be very, very particular about what you're going to shoot, because if you imagine, you know, you saw the images of that road, right? Well, you know, round the corner from that road, you couldn't move, right? Trees were everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. The road that we cleared was the bit that we were going to use. So you just know, you know, in the old days, you might have gone, okay, let's do a shot where we swing around the corner and then go up in the air and show the whole city. And you couldn't do any of that, right? Because you knew that it was just a disaster. So you frame your shots very particularly, and you make it work in a very focused, and you almost become more forensic about your work. And I figured
we have time for one more question.
I could pull that, I figured if I could pull it off, I could pretty much pull anything off.
Right. Definitely. A great answer, by the way. Thank you. So she said we have time for one more question. Let's see here. Last question. Do you have any upcoming projects that we should be on the lookout for besides Driven?
Yeah, I'm going to do the story of when Malcolm X met Fidel Castro in New York in 1960.
Awesome.
And stayed in the Hotel Teresa. And so that's the next one with the same writer.
The same writer? Awesome. When is that going to be out, do you think? Next year? Or?
When it's out, I haven't started filming it yet. I'm going to start early next year, start shooting.
Oh, awesome. Fantastic. Well, we'll be on the lookout for that. It was a pleasure talking to you today, Nick. We absolutely loved Driven.
My pleasure.
We'll post this up next week on our website, this full interview.
Great. Great.
Hopefully you have a good rest.
I'm actually finishing a show right now, which is kind of cool, which is called White Lines. And it's for Netflix. And it's written by a guy called Alex Pina, who writes the Money Heist thing for them. So this is a new show for Netflix that comes out in March. I'm shooting that right now.
All right, cool. We'll be on the lookout for
the next movie is that.
All right.
Okay, man. Nice to speak to you.
Yeah, nice talking to you.
Take care.
Cheers.
And you, man. Take care. Bye. Bye. Bye.
So that was my conversation with the director, Nick Hamm. I love his English accent. And I just really had a great time talking to him. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that, you know, finding out about how we got involved with this project, what it was like filming in Puerto Rico, like I was saying before and after the Hurricane Maria. You know, talking about the short documentary they made about making of this movie, a documentary of everything that the crew and the people that live in Puerto Rico went through while filming this, and just really heartbreaking. And hopefully they'll eventually release that to the public. I got to see it, a private screener for it. And it's about 15 minutes long, but it's just very heartbreaking to see what these people went through that are still going through this to this day, you know, struggling, not having water and food and your basic needs that we take for granted. You know, also talking to Nick, you know, overcoming the struggles of filming this movie and what's next and upcoming projects he's going to be working on and we should be on the lookout for. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that interview, that conversation with Nick Hamm about his new film, Driven. It's a film you definitely have to go see and support. It's definitely one of my favorite indies I've seen this year. Had an absolute great time with it. I love the chemistry between Jason Sudeikis and Lee Pace in this film. And also supporting cast of Corey Stoll and Judy Greer did a really great job in this. And it was interesting seeing what they encounter, what they go through in this film, having to do with, you know, cocaine and this guy being an FBI informant and, you know, John DeLorean being this huge figure back then and designing these cars. You see, you know, a rich man kind of go downhill and make some really bad choices just to keep his company afloat. So I thought it was a very interesting story. Great cast of people, and I thought it was definitely original as well. A movie I haven't seen before, and I really appreciated that. So if you guys are not familiar with the film Driven, it's in theaters, video on demand and digital on August 16th, so definitely go check it out if it's playing in a theater near you. So we got some huge projects coming up in the near future for Cinephellas. We got fall around the corner. It's the middle of August right now, so fall is a month away, so that means a lot of TV shows coming out, returning, movies hitting the big screen, a lot of movies I'm really excited for coming this fall season. One being Dr. Sleep that's coming out in November. The Lighthouse that's coming out October 18th by A24. Robert Eggers' new film. And a bunch of TV shows returning, like we were talking about in the previous podcast, American Horror Story, Ray Donovan, the list goes on and on. Lots of great stuff. The best time for TV and movies, in my opinion, is the fall season. A lot of great content coming up on our website, YouTube channel, social media outlets. So be on the lookout for that. So I want to thank all of you for listening. This is Logan Myerz signing out from Cinephellas Studios and Cinephellas Podcast, episode 39. Until the next podcast, cheers! Love you, boys.